Hi, Scalable Investors. Today I have with me Sri Latha. Sri is a multifamily investor in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is very interesting because it's obviously a high cost of living area, but I'm really excited to have her on to go into more detail about, hey, she's started her real estate career there, as well as implemented her BRRRR strategy on over 50 multifamily units, and also currently looking at a deal she's underwriting for a 115 unit hotel to multifamily conversion deal. So Sri, again, thanks for being with us, and how is it going today? What are you up to?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm working on a whole bunch of stuff, so happy to be here and talk more.
Perfect. Well, why don't we get into things? I read on your profile you were a data scientist by training, but
That's
you
right.
somehow got into real estate. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I went to school for statistics and economics. I studied undergrad in economics in India. Then I moved to the US to do my master's degree in applied statistics. And I went on to work as a data scientist for many years in corporate America, building FICO scores. So we built statistical models to predict the credit score. So that's what I did. I built them for other countries. I built them for banks all over the world. That was my day job. And while I was doing that, I was, stashing away all my, the money and savings. And around 2010, my husband got sick. So this was kind of the big motivation for us because he got a disease called rheumatoid arthritis. And it really threw a wrench in our, so-called like steady lives. And we had to, and the doctor basically told us that he might be disabled in 5 years, which was like a shock to me at least. And so we thought we need to do something about this if this were to be true. And we didn't, assume that would be the case, but he couldn't even walk. He woke up one day, went to work, and by noon he couldn't walk. So it was very startling, and it was a shock to our system. But over the next year, he got better. Like we actually worked on rehabilitating him. He got like 80–90% better, and he's been fine ever since. And we've just been managing the disease, and he's been fine. But that really lit a fire in us to look at getting some passive income and kind of fast forwarding the process of what if we do have to rely on another source of income if my husband were not able to work. So that brought us to a couple of different options. Most of those involve a lot of work, but real estate investing was pretty straightforward in terms of we were renters at that point. We knew that apartment renting is profitable. And so we started off with the basis, and you're buying an asset that has value. So it's not like you're starting a business where you need to like really invest time, energy, and effort into building it up. Real estate, we knew we had to do some work, but we knew we'd get that cash flow once it was stabilized. So we always gravitated towards real estate, and there's some stuff that, from my childhood also, that I was always leaning towards real estate as a vehicle for, passive income. So I had no questions about it. There was no like ickiness or, sometimes you think of running a business and you think, is this a shady thing to do or not? But real estate was so straightforward, very simple math. It's not very complicated. It's been done for decades and centuries, maybe even. So it was very straightforward that we landed on real estate. But from there, and like most people, we thought, oh, we'll maybe buy another, like a duplex or a triplex. That's where we started, and I started looking at properties. But very quickly, because my data science is a part of me and in my blood, so to speak, I started like really putting down the numbers on an Excel sheet. And I saw a triplex here in the local area. And it had a huge backyard, and I thought, what if I put another unit in here? And then I started to do the math for adding units. And that's when I realized, oh, hey, the math really does work out way better when I add another unit. At that point, I decided, I'm going to invest in apartments. I'm going to buy as many units as I can with the money I have. So that ended up being my first deal. I bought my first 12-unit apartment in Dallas, in Texas. So it was actually out of state. It wasn't in California, my first one.
Okay. It is interesting, your husband's predicament, because it feels like often that's kind of pitched as a hypothetical scenario that none of us really want to encounter,
That's
but
right.
you did. And I think sometimes it's really important to have a catalyst, whether it's your own why or something
Correct.
that slaps you in the face, and you don't have to wonder what your why is. That's it.
That's right. Yeah, because sometimes people try to compare journeys, and I'm always like, trust me, it's not the same because I took bigger risks because for me, the payoff needed to be higher. So for me, that first deal was a big deal, and it was 12 units as opposed to maybe a 3 or 4 kind of safer number where people say start small and go big. For me, it was about, you know, jumping right in and taking that chance as opposed to, you know, playing it small.
Okay, and I mean, even by a lot of people's standards, I've heard maybe 16 or 32 is the minimum units you need to really have a scalable multifamily business. So I think 12 is still a respectable amount,
Correct.
and I think that it is interesting how it was out of state. So could you discuss that a little bit? And um, besides the obvious
Sure.
reason that it's very expensive in the San Francisco area,
Right.
why and how did you go about buying in Dallas?
The standard narrative in buying multifamily in California is that it doesn't cash flow and that the, you know, the entry price points are really high. An average fourplex around here probably costs somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5. Some a little bit lesser, some a little bit more, but those were not the price points that I wanted to look at when I said I want to buy a large number of units. At that point, I decided, you know, I bought into that narrative. Now I know better. But at that point, I was just starting out and I didn't know any better. So I decided to invest out of state. And at that point, I wasn't very sophisticated, I'll be honest. I just Googled what are the top multifamily markets in America. And I saw the name Dallas come up, I mean, the city come up multiple times on multiple lists. And I narrowed it down to 3, I believe. And then I just picked Dallas. My husband and I flew out there once we, you know, got a sense of, you know, this is the one we're going to invest in, and we started to make offers on properties in Dallas. Once we found the right brokers, we picked up the phone and called a bunch of brokers who had active listings, and really that's all we did. And we started to work through those, and some of them started to bring us deals through that process as well. And I got into contract on this one at about $720 something thousand for 12 units. Those units were mostly 1 bedrooms and they were being rented out at $700 a month. And we were looking at doing renovations and stabilizing them at about $1,000. We ended up getting $1,050, which is about a $350 increase from when we bought it. And we were able to rehab all of the units in about a year and a half. And at that point, we decided to actually sell the property. We considered holding it, but my husband had already, you know, he was getting better. We didn't really need the cash flow. I was working, we both were working, and we said, if we can grow our initial investment in a year and a half, then why don't we take, you know, our down payment and our profit and then roll it into a bigger deal, which is what we did for our next deal. Because I truly believe in kind of the exponential growth for real estate, and you need that kind of exponential growth in your initial stages of investing.
Okay, so you didn't like join a mastermind group or use a mentor or anything? It's just mainly you and your husband?
No, we just
Okay.
winged it at that point. But once we got that first deal under the belt, we were way more confident and we knew what we were doing. And we learned from the mistakes kind of that we made. One being that we didn't get the right kind of financing. And we ended up having to put almost 35% down, you know, and in the process of redoing that property. So we learned to use a mortgage broker or you know, reach out to multiple lenders and get the best leverage on these deals, because if your leverage is too high, then your profits are not going to, the profits as a percentage of your cash in is not going to look as good.
Okay, so 35% is like a hard money loan or something?
No, it was high because it was a conventional. It was like with Wells Fargo's commercial division, and we didn't know any better. Wells Fargo is like really small for commercial, even smaller than Chase. for commercial lending. So, but we didn't know any better. So we just chose the one that we had our home mortgage with, which was Wells Fargo. And so but what we recognized was once we were in contract and we were getting close to the actual closing is they came back and said, no, we need a larger down payment, which happens a lot in these value add apartments because the value that the bank gives the apartment is based on today's rent, not on the rent that you're projecting, right? They only lend you on the undervalued asset, not the new value of the asset. So it is to be expected that you are going to have to put a larger down payment if you're looking to do value add apartments.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I spoke with someone from Wells Fargo in their commercial lending. Yeah, recently, because I was just curious, just shopping around, getting rates and seeing what it was out there. And he said because of COVID, they're requiring 45% down. And I was thinking that's it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's not going to work. And don't do it. I mean, it helped us, you know, kind of get a foot in the door, but knowing now what I know now, I would not do it. But it was fine. Some part of real estate is kind of jumping in. So in that sense, yes, there was learning. I mean, because you can't learn everything before you go into a deal. There'll still be surprises.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to know what you don't know.
Correct.
You just have to do it. So, okay. So coming from the data science background, have you applied any of that knowledge or those skills to your underwriting or analyzing markets or anything like that?
I think the data science background really brings a comfort with the numbers and a curiosity about the numbers. Those are really the two big things that it really brings, because as data scientists, we are trained to question everything. So every line item, and honestly, the real estate underwriting is not complicated. It can be cumbersome, but it's not complicated necessarily, right? A data scientist, for example, the kind of modeling that I was doing in plain math terms was probably more sophisticated, and I don't need to apply that to real estate. It's really not that complicated a problem to solve in real estate. But what it really brings is that curiosity to ask a question about every line item, and also thinking a little bit out of the box in terms of expenses and rents. So for example, if I see whatever rents that on the OM, I never accept them for what they are, right? I always do my own research to see what are the market rents and what are other ways that I can increase the rents on this property. Like if I put a washer dryer in, if I put storage units in, if I had them pay for parking and added a pet rent, right? A pet fee and a common area fee, whatever it may be. I do question that number that I get from them. I don't kind of accept it as for what it's worth. And same for the expenses. I question every line item. And those kind of skills have definitely been useful with being an individual kind of real estate investor. But none of the complicated AI stuff was being used in real estate. Maybe at some point, once I'm completely financially free, at that point I might start a little startup or something where I can do some cool stuff. But at this point, there's no need for that in the individual kind of real estate realm. Yes, there's a comfort in the numbers. I know how to kind of look at a new market. But for me, the deal numbers always trump the market numbers. So I see a lot of people emphasizing, finding the perfect market. And I really think that's, it's a false, I mean, it's maybe emphasized too much. Let me put it that way. The deal numbers are way more important than trying to, in an average market, right? Given any average markets, which is why people make money in real estate in any market, right? Even in Timbuktu, someone's making money on real estate because it really comes down to understanding the deal and the deal's numbers in any given market. So market numbers matter, but it doesn't matter as much when you're doing the kind of strategy that I'm doing, which is the heavy value add strategy. The numbers on the specific deal needs to work way better than the market numbers need to. But
Okay,
if you're doing buy and hold, for example, the market really matters because you're buying at market and the market needs to go up for you to make money. But because I'm forcing that appreciation, I don't need to buy to a market that's super, super good or super, bad. Any average market, as long as the deal makes sense, can work for me. There's a downside risk for some markets, and so I try to stay middle ground. So somewhat of an average market. I do look at employment numbers. I do look at average household income, and I look at population growth. But those are my three big ones.
Okay. And you hit on it a little bit, but you mentioned some out-of-box strategies. So like thinking out of the box, can you go into that a little bit more in terms of like cash for keys or ADUs, or what is an ADU, for example?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I came to this, so after I sold that deal in Dallas, I had doubled my money, and I was bringing it back to California simply because I could now afford California. So I bought 14 units in California, and I now had to, I was coming up with a strategy that works in California, and that looks very different from the vanilla, value add strategy that was done in Dallas, which is, you get in there when the lease runs out, you renovate, and you put it back on the market. It's pretty straightforward. But in California, there's a couple of constraints. One is rent control. Back then, all of California was not rent controlled, but now all of California is rent controlled, which essentially, and you being from New York, I'm sure you're familiar with what rent control means, is that the landlords cannot increase rents beyond about like 3.5% every year. And not just that, when the lease expires, for people who've already been living in the apartment, as long as they are paying their monthly rents, there's no lease expiration. They can continue to stay, and there's no way you can, find a way to renovate those units. And because so many parts of California have been historically rent controlled for many decades, similar to New York, and a one-bedroom apartment maybe be rented out for $500, but today that same one bedroom, which is not rent controlled, is being the same apartment that is at market is being rented out at $2,500. So you're talking about a huge gap between a rent controlled unit rent versus one that is at today's market rates. So what cash for keys essentially is it's a mutual agreement between you, the owner, and the tenant, that the tenant will be, and you come up with a sum of money that the tenant is willing to take in return for giving you the keys of the apartment vacant, essentially. So they willingly vacate the unit in return for taking cash. So that's why it's called cash for keys. And this is completely legal. It's legal in all 50 states, I believe. And it has been used by landlords for decades, actually. And it's actually a common strategy that is being used in rent-controlled areas. And the only people who take it, honestly, are people who are looking to move anyway. So what we found is that if we can negotiate with tenants a sum of money to have them move out, we can then renovate that unit and put that unit onto the market. And how that works out in terms of numbers is that when I buy the property, I'm buying it at the lower rent. So I'm paying a cheaper price for the property itself because the income is low on the property. But the moment I do cash for keys and the unit's vacant, I now have a bump up, say, of $2,000 or $1,000, like whatever it might be, right? In my example, it was $500 to $2,500. That's about $2,000 bump up in rent. That's a huge impact on your net operating income. And I assume your audience might be familiar with that. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's a big bump up in net operating income. So if you can do that even on a couple of units, that bumps up your net operating income significantly enough that you are now adding value to your property on the back end if you're going to sell it. If you want to hold it, that's fine, but if you're still adding a huge amount of value. What I've found is about $1,000 on a 5 cap is about $200,000 in sale price, increase in sale price. So you're looking, so even if you paid, and cash for keys, you pay the tenant somewhere between, at least in these parts of California, somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 is what you pay the tenant to be able to do cash for keys. And there are banks that actually lend you, banks, I mean hard money lenders or private money lenders who will lend you the money to pay for these tenant buyouts, as they call it. The second thing you asked me about is ADU, right? So ADU is Accessory Dwelling Unit. Essentially, these are little cottages that people put in their backyards. And California state came up with these laws last year? Yeah, last year, that essentially make it very easy for homeowners to put one of these in the backyard. They extended that to include multifamily. So what that means is you can have a multifamily property and you can put an extra 2 units in your backyard, and now you have 2 more units. And all you do is add the cost of constructing those 2 units. Or you could also convert a basement, if you already have one, into an ADU, which would be cheaper than putting a new piece of construction in your backyard. So we've done this successfully. When I say we, I mean it's my husband and I. We've done this successfully in our multifamily units, where we've added ADUs in the backyards of our smaller multifamilies, and for the bigger multifamilies, we're able to take out some parking, because in high-dense cities like New York and San Francisco, you don't really need parking, and the state allowed you gave you leeway to get rid of some parking in return for putting units. So putting units is a way better use of your money, because your net operating income is increasing by way more than if you had parking there, because parking is maybe $50, $100 or maybe even more, but it's not as lucrative as putting an actual unit where you can get thousands of dollars from it. So that's ADU. The third thing I do is called layout changes. Essentially what that is you take an existing apartment unit, okay? So like done this successfully with studios. Some studios, especially the older ones, have these have these separate kitchens. So they actually have a kitchen that's a room inside the studio. And what we did was we just gutted the whole studio and built a junior 1-bedroom. So we took some of the square footage from the kitchen, and we added a little bit more from the living room and made that into a small bedroom. And we kept the kitchen as a kind of open floor plan kitchen. When we did that, we got way more, $300 more than we could have got on a renovated studio, just by adding that little wall to separate out the one bedroom, even though it was still only 450 square foot or smaller. So that's what I mean when I say layout changes. So those are the 3 strategies that I've used successfully thus far. Okay,
so it's basically like adding a permanent partition in the room to like a 1 to a 2-bedroom, for example.
Correct. Yeah, and the benefit of doing that is once the city approves you once on 1 unit, you've established that now all your units can be converted to a 1-bedroom. So even if you were to not convert, even if you were to sell your property after that 1 renovation, you can now justify the cost and a bump in cost, because your new value-add investor can come in and do the rest of the units if they want to, but at this increased price, because you're going to get an extra $300 from doing this, and you've established that the city will permit it and is allowed. So getting that done, we only did that for 6 units. We still have old tenants in the remaining 6 on our property, but just having done that, even if I were to sell that property today, I know I'll get a premium because I've proven that this model works, and whoever the new owner is just needs to do it for the remaining 6.
Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. I know living in New York, I would stay in apartments. I don't know if they were legally converted or not, but you'd always have these, either permanent or temporary makeshift separators and dividers in the rooms. Sometimes just a curtain, which is not a lot of privacy. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you really have to, because it's legally a one bedroom, you can't advertise it as a one bedroom. So that makes a difference in the kind of rents you can get. So you'll get rents somewhere between a studio and a large one bedroom, say a 600 square foot one bedroom. So you'll get a rent somewhere between there, but it's still a bump up of a couple $100 from a studio.
Okay. Yeah. And it's definitely going to be more meaningful than, like you said, just starting to charge for covered parking, which may or may not even be year round. Right. So.
Correct. Yeah. For sure.
Okay. What I think was really interesting is how you found this hotel that you're looking to convert to multifamily. It's 115 units, you said. So why don't you go into detail about that a little bit more and why you decided or how you determined that it's a great conversion deal?
Yeah, so late last year, my husband and I sold a couple of properties in California with the intention of getting more cash flow out of state. So we had equity stuck in properties here, but the return on the equity was not great. So we said, okay, we wanted more cash flow. So we said we're going to sell California, not all of it, some of it, and then look to buy out of state. And as we were underwriting deals, we found, and this was late last year, and things were pretty compressed. There were not a lot of profit margins. We're not seeing a lot of value add deals that were truly value add, right? I mean, you could do some light rehab, but that wasn't our strategy. Our strategy really involves a lot more work and really getting a good bump up in rents, not just 100 or 150, but we're looking at a real big bump in rents and at least $1 million in profits. That's kind of our underwriting minimum requirement, is we were looking for $1 million in profit. And so we did find some multifamily that fit the criteria. And as we were looking through this, and I met this woman here in California who does land rezoning and entitlements. So she takes a piece of land and she gets it rezoned and re-entitled. Entitled essentially means she gets it, she gets all the drawings in place to convert it to a hotel. That's what she does. And so I met with her, and I really put a lot of ideas in my head around kind of the next step for us in real estate. Because once you follow a strategy, you tend to just rinse and repeat. But I think it was time for us to really take a step back and really look at real estate as a whole and see which one really fits what we want to do next. And one of the things, the interesting things was rezoning and entitlement process. And so she didn't actually do any physical work on the piece of land. It was just going to the city and getting permits and building drawings and things like that approved with the city. So I learned about rezoning, and I went back and I read about it. I went to the local city hall and planning department and asked them a bunch of questions, even though I was not going to invest in California, but I wanted to understand how it works. So I went to city hall and asked a bunch of questions to the planning department, and I started to get more comfortable with it. And then I started to call brokers, asking if they had deals where there was a conversion possibility. And right around the time a deal actually came to my desk through a broker, where it was a hotel where half of the land, it was 2 parcels. One was already zoned for multifamily and one was a hotel zoning. That deal didn't go through, but it definitely put the idea in my mind that this could work. And so I worked with a consultant. There are zoning and land use consultants in almost every city in this country. And you can basically work with them to figure out what fits your criteria and what the zoning looks like for that particular city. So that's essentially what I did. I worked with them to narrow down the addresses of the properties that I was going after. And once I narrowed that list down to about 20 properties, I gave it to the broker and said, just call them. Call them and bring me a deal. So it was very specific for the broker, so they loved it. And they just pretty much picked up the phone, called a bunch, and came back and said, yeah, I have 2 people interested, and I got into contract on one of those.
Okay. But in terms of the interiors, do you really need to do any work to convert?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So we do need to, especially, so most of these hotels tend to be older hotels. You do need to do, you put new sprinkler systems. You need to separately meter these rooms if you're not going to do an all bills paid. So your options are that you do an all bills paid apartment where your renter, you just have a flat rent that covers all utilities. That's one option, and to avoid separately metering. Otherwise, you do have to separately meter them. And the most important part is actually putting a kitchen in it. So most hotel rooms don't have kitchens, but if you're a studio unit, you probably do need to put a kitchen in. So that is the other cost. That's a big expense. And of course, you want to do renovations that too. But we're looking at large CapEx numbers. So in this case, at least $1.5 million in renovations.
Okay, and did you work with a contractor to help kind of calibrate and understand what that cost is going to be?
Correct. Yeah, multiple contractors bid on the project, and we had to work with them to work the numbers down to where we wanted it to be and where we were comfortable with it being, knowing that there's going to be a buffer on top of that. But we worked them down to the number that we were looking for. Worked with the city department to make sure that we are hitting all of their criteria, because they came back with a list of things that we needed to do as part of the conversion. So we wanted to make sure we got all those things in, all the minimum requirements in, so we don't get into any trouble.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also noticed that you were able to, on a different property, you were able to cash flow about $100,000 from it. And people have been asking how to do this, which is, I definitely want to know.
Okay.
But also, why don't we talk first about that, but then how to kind of go from the day job like you did, the W-2, to generating stable cash flow streams and really reaching that financial independence, which for so many of us is kind of a thought in our head that we sometimes struggle to make real.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the 100,000 cash flow deal came from a property that I bought for $2.9 million. So it's not somebody's first property that you're buying that you're going to get that $100,000. So it's important to understand that. But that said, the first property may not get you there, but if you roll the cash in from that first deal or first two deals, it'll get you to the point where you can buy a $3 million property. So that's one piece that I want to emphasize, is that you want that exponential growth when you first start investing. And I really truly believe not enough people talk about this, because people love the BRRRR strategy, but the BRRRR strategy is very linear. You buy one property, you improve it, and then you refinance it, and you take your same down payment out. So you put in $200,000, you get out $200,000, and then you take that $200,000 and you buy the same size property again, right? So you're kind of not increasing the size and the exponentiality of that of the growth of your money. But if you put in 1x and you get 2x out, and you take 2x and you make it 4x, that's 4x in 2 deals. But if you did BRRRR, you'd have to do 4 deals, right? You put in 1x, you get 2x. You take out 1x, you get another 2x, right? So you have to you only take 1x out every time. You have to do 4 deals to get 4x. So you really need to think about the exponential growth in the early stages of your real estate investing journey in order to get to that number quicker. And yes, there is some risk involved, but if you already doing it while you have a job, you can afford to take that risk, and you don't need that cash flow right now. And this strategy is obviously geared to those people who don't need the cash flow right now. But when you want to retire, say in 10 years from now, or 6 years, whatever that may be, then at that point, you'll have a way bigger number to work with than starting out small and then just slowly working your way up, which can be frustrating, whereas this can snowball that effect much faster. So that's the key to really getting that $100,000 a year in cash flow. The property that I'm talking about is in California. It was 14 units, and we did the same strategy, right? So this was before that city was rent controlled, but essentially we bought it under market, and we renovated it. When we bought it, the units were at about $800 a month, and after renovation they were at $1,300 a month. So we got $500 more per month on each of those 14 units, which all translated into getting that $100,000 in cash flow. We did take some cash out refi from that, which later lowered it, but it did cash flow over $100,000 comfortably if you did not take a cash out. So I tend to, do this kind of exponential flipping, if you want to call it, of apartments until I hit 100,000. After I hit $100,000, I really don't try to sell it. I just like hold on to it for most part. Yeah. So that's the key to really getting that $100,000 number.
Okay, that makes sense. And before we started recording, you had mentioned that you're a realtor and just trying to work in a few other income streams there. Could you discuss that and if you'd recommend people getting their realtor license and how that process is?
Yeah, so I got my realtor license maybe like 5 years after I actually started investing, or 4.5, something like that. I did want to do my own deals. That was one of the big motivations to getting a realtor license. I honestly don't think it is a requirement by any means to get started in investing. I think it's a bonus that can come a few deals down the line, but it's really not a requirement, and you shouldn't really focus on that at all because it takes away from your ability to underwrite deals and focus on what really matters, which is getting the deal numbers to work for the strategy that you're looking to do. So it really detracts from that, and the job of a realtor really, it is a job. It's not an investing proposition, right? So when you become a realtor, your job is to talk to people day in and day out and figure out if they want to buy or sell. So that it's essentially a job. It's like a day job. So it's not. I won't recommend it for someone who's looking to retire from a day job to necessarily get their license now. But if after you've built out your real estate portfolio to a certain extent and you really like real estate and you want to take your real estate growth to the next level, yes, you can get your license because it really gives you access to things like title. And you can pull title reports on, on different properties, see, people's, how much they're, outstanding, maybe not outstanding, but their original loan amounts on those properties. You get to figure out who the owners are and pick up the phone and call them directly. It gives you all of those resources to be able to do that stuff. But it should not be the focus of your earlier stage in your investment. But if you're kind of ready to take it to the next level, or you're not seeing properties on the market that fit your criteria, but you really want it and you want to understand the inside workings of a realtor and how to source deals, then I would at that point focus on that, because for the strategy that I'm outlining, you really don't need a realtor to bring you deals. Like on pretty much all my first few deals were all on MLS deals. I mean, sorry, on market deals, right? That's what I should say. On market deals. They were not, all off market or some secret, nothing. They were just properties that were on the market, but their rents were under, right? That's all you have to focus on, identifying how much lower are the rents on this property compared to the market. So for that strategy to work, you don't really need a realtor license or try to find off-market properties and the needle in the haystack type of deals. There are deals that are available that are also already on market. But a couple of deals in, if you really want to go that route and find that little diamond in the rough, then yeah, you can get your real estate license.
Okay.
Oh, the other important thing, which I just remember, is if you there's tax benefits to being a realtor, which I wanted to quickly touch on. So if you have a spouse who's working and you own rental property and you also work as a realtor, there's something in the IRS called the real estate professional status. I won't go into IRS rules. I'm not a tax professional, but look up real estate professional status and you will see that there are ways to take the passive losses from your rental property to write off against the active income of your spouse. So you can actually write off your real estate losses against W-2 income in certain scenarios. And that number, when I ran that through my CPA, worked out to be way in my favor. of quitting and becoming a realtor. And I already love real estate, so it was a no-brainer for me. So, so there's some tax benefits too.
Okay, yeah, it's really interesting. Our CPA educated us on that just when we most recently did our taxes. Yeah, he's just saying I think you have to have like 7 or 50 hours worked throughout the year. And
that's right. I mean, you can never justify it with a job. And if you get audited, my understanding is that you'll be in trouble if you do that with a full-time job. But the moment you're kind of getting ready to quit, it's a good incentive to transition into getting the license and being a realtor to get that additional tax benefit as well.
Okay, yeah, and then you have a paper trail, and you're kind of proving to the IRS, so you don't
Correct.
get grilled.
Correct. In the event of an audit, you already work as a realtor, so there's no I guess gray area.
Right. I've heard from some people that having a real estate license would potentially impede your ability to wholesale deals, but is that true, or is that just a myth?
I think the reason that comes up is because when you talk to a seller, for example, right? So you knock on their door or whatever, and you talk to them and say, hey, I would like to buy your property. They're wary of realtors. So they might ask you, are you a realtor? And if you say, no, I'm actually looking to buy your property, which is what a wholesaler would say, then they're more willing to talk to you because now you can bring them, you're the buyer, right? You're bringing them an offer yourself. So in that sense, I think, I'm not sure of the entire context, but in that sense, it makes sense that a seller would be more open and willing to talk to you rather than a realtor who they may not be wanting to actually list with. But if they ask you, are you a realtor, you can't say no if you already hold your license. So I think that puts you in a tough spot because they think that if you get it into contract and then you don't sell it, that you're going to ask them to list it. So it's just a kind of it's just the ease of talking to the seller, I believe.
Okay, yeah, just a certain dynamic there, and maybe there's a way to sidestep that.
I'm sure there is. I am sure there is. Yeah, yeah. And I have bought properties from wholesalers, so yeah. I mean, it's a job, and they do a good job.
Okay. For our last question before we go, I realize you have a family, a couple kids, right? How many kids do you have?
2 kids, yeah. 2 kids, 2 boys, 2 and 4 years old.
Wow. So how is that process of juggling that, which is a job in itself, of course?
Yes.
And the real estate investing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of real estate investing is that it be passive. So I think over the years we've tried to continue to keep it passive. There have been, certain phases where you're doing more work than others, but we've tried as much to not be too hands-on with everything that we do, and to truly keep it passive. And actually investing out of state really taught us how to be truly passive by putting the right people in place. For example, I've never picked an appliance. I've never picked a certain tile. I've not done any of those things being a realtor. I really just hire the right contractors, the right property managers, the right people to oversee any of the jobs that I do. And my job is to make sure that they're on their game and keep them accountable. But really, real estate investing lends itself to being, family friendly in that sense, but it's still hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, with the pandemic, it only got worse with having, kids at home, because my kids did go to daycare when on a regular school year, they would be in daycare, but they've been home since all of this started. And so, yeah, I mean, it does come down to, managing time and outsourcing what you can't do. So I have no qualms about saying that I do hire nannies and babysitters when I need to get to work. I think women, especially moms, put unreasonable amounts of expectation on themselves to do everything. So I really I learned from mostly the men I see around me, which is to be honest with yourself and figure out what you can and can't do, and outsource the things that you can't do. And that's really been instrumental in not slowing down the business at the same time as growing a family. And I still have good amounts of time with my family, which I love. Yeah, and real estate really lends itself to that. And I know that at any point I can always dial it down because it's my business. And I can choose to dial it up when they get older if I wanted to. So that really helps with that.
Okay. Very interesting. So if our listeners want to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so my website is thesrilatha.com. So that's TheSriLathaGroup.com. thesrilatha.group.com. My email is shri@thesrilatha.group.com. I'm on Instagram as Bay Area _multifamily. All of these places you can reach me and schedule a call with me. I do some multifamily coaching. And I do bring on some investors on my own deals. So if that sounds like something you'd want to partner on, feel free to reach out and we can take it from there.
All right. Well, it was definitely a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time, and hope to do this again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Mason.